are so pleased to have such a wonderful crowd here to see both the art of Sylvia Piquel, her quilt, and the art of Jackie Kern, who is one of my best friends. Yeah. So I've got to read. We are really honored and excited to have you here and to present your art. And she's a South Florida-based, West Palm Beach? North Palm Beach. Not North Palm Beach, okay. So Jackie Kern is an artist, former educator, and adjunct professor, published author, designer, and administrative director for the John Kern Realty Group at Keller Williams. And John, where are you? John! My other best friend. She has exhibited extensively in Florida. She received her BFA in painting, drawing from State University of New York, and her Ph.D. in teaching learning from the University of North Dakota. She has a varied career, visual arts, grade K through 8, university administrative positions and academic affairs, student affairs, and continuing education. In her many administrative roles, she has performed recruitment activities, academically advised and mentored students in various degree programs, facilitated learning, accommodations for students with disabilities, which is very close to my heart, and coordinated student learning and social activities to shape their educative and community experience. Her creative process, as you can see, revolves around lines and quirky forms and vibrant colors and the spontaneous interplay they create with the composition. Eric LaChance, hi Eric, who made this a reality tonight, notes that Jacqueline Kern's work resonates in a human space we have grown to inhabit. The boundaries between childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. Through her Dollhouse series, the viewer is invited to identify facets of gender fed via advertising through a child's perspective. In Kern's abstracts, there is unease and beauty, an overlap as individual and intangible as that transition into adulthood. Jackie's artist statement, I really like her artist statement, centers around dollhouse and abstract natural themes. The dollhouse artworks symbolize the complexities of social dynamics, emotions, and at times even traumatic experiences within the home. In my abstract artworks, I explore natural forms either found in the world around us or from my imagination. As individuals, we are shaped by our childhood experiences. As a child, I would come home from school and use my chalkboard to teach my imaginary class. I would also don my artist smock and create works of art in my studio, my childhood bedroom, while listening to top 40 tunes and thinking to myself, "You're good." These moments strengthened my confidence and propelled my studies of the visual arts, even when my environment did not support it. The cultural influences of the 60s, 70s, and 80s fueled my fascination with the gender roles prevalent during those eras. Mine too. But more 60s. I was acutely aware of societal expectations regarding femininity and masculinity. Being constantly reminded to act like a lady left a lasting impression on me. I looked up to and listened closely to the adults in my life, seeking cues on how to behave, dress, and communicate. While my dollhouse artworks reflect the rules of polite society, embedded cultural and gender beliefs and childhood trauma, my abstract artworks express complete freedom from having to perform, please, or seek approval. My artistic language is inspired by living organisms. I draw upon direct observations or intuitive imagery from seeds, stones, plants, figures like goddesses, angels, and mothers. My dollhouse imagery may evoke nostalgia for the pop culture of the 60s and early 70s, while serving as a stage for human drama and personal baggage filled with furniture, props, and symbolic elements. The abstract artworks serve my artistic inner child, expressing pure creativity, encompassing imagery from the natural and fantasy world. I believe all these symbols themselves transcend time. We would not be here, we could not do this without the support of our members, many of whom are here today, our board of directors, many of whom are here today, and our community. We want to thank our signature sponsors, FTC, and the Andrew. Isn't Chip Chase the greatest? I mean,
where's Chip? Is he here?
No, he's not. But he's my friend at FTC. And the Andrew D. Zolkin Fund for Visual and Performing Art of Central Carolina Community Foundation. And for the ongoing support of Sumter County Government, the South Carolina Arts Commission, which receives support from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Williams Bryce Edwards Charitable Trust. Flowers, courtesy of K. Stockbridge and the Azalea Garden Club and the Council of Garden Clubs of Sumter. And the flowers are grand. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Jackie Kern to
Well, I just want to thank everyone for being here. It means a lot. And I want to thank Karen, our fearless leader. She's been wonderfully supportive, and we couldn't do this without you. And I also want to thank Eric LaChance, because he's the curator for the show. And if you look around, even though I created the work, Eric arranged it. And the way he arranged it is really quite beautiful. And I just saw it today before I came in, and I almost started crying. So I don't know if you know how hard curators work, but they work really hard. So I praise Karen for hiring him. I would like to thank my husband John, because he put up with me this last year while I was preparing for the show. Like I would be painting in my studio, which is like the living room, and John would come home from golf and he'd be really hungry and he'd be in the kitchen, eating chips. And I was like, I'm painting! Please go! And he'd be like, so thank you, John. We're going to be married 25 years on November 26th. So and I would also like to thank one of my very bestest friends, Marucci LaChance, the mother of this great young man here. She's been a dear friend of mine for a lot of years, and she's been a great support to me, so I have to thank her. Okay, so where should we begin?
So I would like to hear more about your artistic beginnings as that child in your first studio.
Yes, and that was glad Karen mentioned that. So I can remember when I came home from school, I would play school. I'd be in the cellar, with my chalkboard, and we'd have like fire drills and ear inspections. Like I was out in the yard, like, come on, kid. Like nobody was there. It was just me. I was imagining it. But it was great. Like I loved it. I did soap operas in my room. I had tea parties. I had imaginary friends that wrote me letters. It was great. And I also did artwork. I did a lot of artwork. And I would be in my room, and I remember Karen, she said that, I remember specifically, I was listening to the radio, popular music, and I was painting, and I was like, wow, this is really good. But I always had to have that validation. And I remember when I was really little, I was telling Eric this, we were on a family vacation in Cape Cod. we were coloring, my sister and I'm like, I'm gonna take this crayon and I'm gonna go all over. I'm not gonna go in the lines. And I was just like, oh, I was like so happy. And I was on the ground and I was doing that. I was like, I remember my father walked by. And he went, that's horrible. And I was like, I never drew out the lines ever again. So, you know, and I was trying to seek that approval from my parents, like, you're good, you're talented. So I was doing a lot of realistic stuff and impressionist stuff. And then I finally had the courage to say, I'm gonna go for it. So starting in like 2019, I started really doing these non-objective pieces, and like the abstract pieces that you see, like they're out there. And that's a great contrast with my dollhouse pieces, which are very representational, very image-driven. And so I would do those, and then I would go back to my non-objective, and it's been a constant thing. So while you may look around here and think, the same person did all this work? Yes, so both of the styles, if you will, kind of complement one another. And I also would like to take this moment, I can't forget Sylvia Patel, who has her show across the hall. It is fabulous, and I'm so proud to be your congregation. Her quotes are amazing, and after I looked at this show and I went over there and I was like, I get it. Eric is a genius, because he figured out all of this works together. So,
Karen's also a genius, so.
yes.
So I think you've talked to where that artistic inclination comes from, and I'd almost like to get right into the Dollhouse series.
Yes.
And sort of talk, if you could tell us about how those are created, about just, you know, the inspiration, the why behind them, other than what you've already told us about.
Well, back in 2015, I was doing dollhouse things, but I was doing individual imagery. Like I was doing like an apron, or an iron, or an espresso pot, or a pair of shoes like from the 70s, or a man's shoe, or a tie. I was doing individual pieces, and I kind of put them together in an exhibit. And then there's two little pieces right there, the otherwise engaged and shut up and take your pills. That's a funny one. So I said, what if I took all those little things that I've been doing separately, and what if I put them together? So I did those two, and then I thought, well, if I can do that, let me try to do it. So my very first dollhouse is over here, and they're all sequential. So I kind of started with like images, if you will, and then I'm like, how can I make these work, and what do they say? So that's what the dollhouse is doing. As Karen was saying, you know, I'm a product of the 60s and 70s, and all of those wonderful gender constructs, like the commercials for beauty, and like, if you had morning breath, your husband would go running into the arms of another woman. And, yeah, I swear, that is an ad. I looked it up. There's another one. If your husband has ring around the collar, well, whose fault is that? Let's see. There's so many, and I'm like, I was fascinated by this. And I was also, I remember as a child, I'd go in the bathroom and like Jergens cold cream, and it had women's faces on it. And there'd be a brunette, a blonde, and a redhead. And I'm like, I wonder what their stories are. And then Breck hairspray had different women. And I would always be like, oh, that's cool. I like her hair. Because hairdos were a big deal in my house. Like, I went to bed with curlers, pin curls. Everybody remember Dippity Doo?
Yes!
Okay. I was like, ooh, Dippity Doo. And who thought of this? They wrapped toilet paper around our heads and sent us to bed. I mean, remember spoolies? Yes! The spoolie, and I had the pink rollers, remember before the spiky? They had the spiky roll, and I would get into bed and I'd go like this. I'd pull them out, I'd wake up and my mother would be like, what happened to your hair? Well, come out. You know, because hair was a big deal. Like, my mother's 93 and she still goes to the hairdresser every Friday for her hair. So, a lot of like the hairdos, like pick your hairdo, that was like a big deal. And if you read comic books, in the back of the comic books, they would have wigs, like women's wigs for $1.50. Look, it's a wig for $1. But and they had all the names, like the Kitty, the Barbara, the Elizabeth. So I was like, I'm gonna do hairdos. So I did that and I named them all. I love collaging, I love to do letter stamps. I use a lot of children's primary letter strip paper because I think that's fun. So.
Could you tell us about the, you've got a lot of imagery of meat and like cuts of meat.
Yes.
And I'm also the cinematographer tonight, so
Okay.
excuse my position all the way in the back of the room.
I give you the cut of meat, the jowl Boston butt. I used to go to the butcher shop. Remember when there were butcher shops? I used to go to the butcher shop with my mother every Saturday. So this one is the pig. I've got the cow over there, and I have the chicken over there. I would go to the butcher shop with my mother on Saturdays, and I was fascinated. Like there'd be like bloody sawdust on the floor, and the butcher, you know, the bloody apron, and what are you having this week, Gloria? And I'd be like I'd be like looking, fascinated with this, you know. And we'd get our meat. We'd have steak every Saturday night. Like meat was like a big deal. Like you had to have your meat, you know. So that was kind of the butcher culture. And plus, you know, women back then, they planned the menu for their families. So like that was a gender construct that was very big. Like we had steak every Saturday night, and then we'd either have pot roast or my mother's Italian, so we'd have macaroni on Sunday with, you know, sauce and meatballs. So like it was a big deal going to the butcher and planning out your meal. So that's why I have a lot of meat references for that domesticity.
And
I was born in Schenectady, New York, which is right near Albany, which is the capital. So. And I've lived in North Dakota, and I was finishing my Ph.D. in North Dakota, and I said, I don't care if I have to flip burgers, I'm going south. And incidentally, a neighbor of mine, we were in graduate school housing, a neighbor of mine was in law school, and I knocked on the door and I said, I'm so bored, give me something to read. And he handed me one of my favorite books called Beach Music by Pat Conroy, which is based in South Carolina.
Oh yeah.
So I read this book cover to cover. You know, we had the worst winter ever. I don't know if you know, like North Dakota, but you have to plug your car in the winter because the heater block, you have to heat it because it'll crack. And I always forgot to unplug it. I'd be backing up like the cord would go. But we had a terrible winter that, like the winter of '97, the Red River Valley rose. Anyway, so I read that book, and I'm like, I'm going south. So, but my parents were snowbirds, so they were in Florida. But I was like, South Carolina, I'll take it, you know, whatever. So yeah, so South Carolina is dear to my heart. So.
And I also just wanted to say that we communicated before, and it's all right if you've got a question during the talk, so feel free to interject.
Yeah, don't be afraid to interrupt.
So, but having said that, I'll switch gears to if you could tell us a little bit about, I'd like to know more about the floral works and the pieces that have more foliage-looking aspects in them.
Yes,
But before we leave the Dollhouse series, you were talking about the meat sort of isolated with your experience as a young girl going with your mom to the butcher and the cuts of meat. But, you know, it so easily translates into gender expectations
Absolutely.
and women and, you know, and the way that they're positioned with a blindfolded woman or, you know, a man in a middle class, living room.
right. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Karen, because you see this figure in Don't Count Your Chickens. This is father figure, and then the very first one I did was called Best of Luck. But you see this guy. Oh, he's not Best of Luck, but you see him. And yes, and a lot of the women do not have eyes. And Marucci and I talked about this. And like you see her, and she's coiffed, and she has her lipstick on, and she doesn't have eyes. It's almost as if it's not important for enough, she's not important enough to have eyes, or that she chooses not to see what her environment is. She's not seeing it, she doesn't want to see it, but yet she's still expected to perform and be pretty and have her makeup and her earrings on and cook and clean and all of that.
Are the animals stand-ins for her body?
The animals are just kind of like symbols of domesticity. Because I always wanted a dog.
Again, when you talk about women's bodies, a lot of it is in the language of, breast, tail,
Yes.
thigh. So just was wondering if it's a representation of, she's disembodied because she's just a head.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and many of these are just a head. But I do the full body in my abstracts, so that's a great question. My abstractions have the breasts, the large hands, the exaggerated feet, but I don't do many of these in the dollhouse. But that's an excellent point.
And I guess that's actually a better segue into the pieces, specifically the one right behind you, where they do have the pupils and the eyes.
Yes. There's a painting over there, Hecate, and here, the one that Karen referred to. I was doing these abstract figures. They were just kind of coming to me, that large hands, the breasts, the interconnection, and that one too, Dorit. And then I stopped myself because I'm like, these are so weird that they're going to think I'm wacko. So I stopped doing those. And these women kind of came to me, and somebody was asking me a question about them, but they literally kind of came to me, and I felt like they needed to be painted. So I just kind of started painting them. And they were really powerful because a lot of times I was working, and I had my music going, and I was kind of like, ooh, it was almost like I was in like a trance-like state. But these women were like, we want to be seen, we need to be painted. And like her especially, Marucci was talking about the goddess Oya. And I love their faces because they're beautiful women of color, and I love that, they're not what we typically see, and I was like, yes, they have a place, they need to be seen, and they kind of came to me. And I did like the tropical components because I kind of felt like they were coming through like the wilderness or the jungle, and they're like, we are here, we're important, we need to be seen. So that's what kind of inspired this. Yes?
I was thinking with that one that you are mixing the animal life and the plant life together. And so are you drawing synergy between the two of them?
That's a great question because I used to do a series where I would do animals, but they would have like human parts. I kind of went through this phase. Like I did a bunny, and one of his ears was the OK sign, and then inside his fur was a woman's face. And then I did another one of a woman. She was wearing a new coat, and she raised her hand, and I said, "This hand looks terrible. It looks like a deer hoof." And I was like, "That's it. It's a deer hoof." So I kind of made a deer hoof, and I gave her ears. So I was doing that before consciously, but here I wasn't doing that consciously. But there is a lot. Like these plants are very organic, and like they come alive in some of these works here. Like they they're living, breathing. So that's a really great question. I did not think of that before, but thank you.
But they're very sensuous and sort of, fertile and fecundity.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm saying that.
Fecundity, yes, that's the word. Yes, fertility. It's like when I do my plant life, it's all about fertility. You'll see leaves, you'll see embryos, pods, that kind of thing. Yes. And in one of my works back there, the travelers, oh, it's right here. If you see my travelers,
That's the goddess.
yeah, the earth goddess, that's traveler. But she's got the embryo in her. If you've looked closely, you'll see that. So yes, that kind of the idea of fertility, fecundity is really important to me.
Question, on this picture with the prayer.
Yes.
With the hand, what was that about?
This one is called Father Figure, and we went to church every Sunday. So no matter what was going on in the home, if Saturday night was turbulent, we went to church on Sunday. And everybody was bright, shiny faces in their places. So it was kind of like, and faith is very important to me. It was very important in our home. So I call this Father Figure. So like, even though there's things going on in the home that we went to church and we looked the part, but we went to church and we had our faith, which sustained us, which was important. Yes?
To me, that's like the sacred and the profane.
Sacred and, okay, yeah, that's great. You mean like the sacred and the domestic, like the everyday? Yes. Yes. Excellent. Good. This is good. Keep these ideas. Good.
One more thing. Do you have any influence by Picasso?
You know, that is very Picasso-like, and he was a genius. So, yes, that kind of, those women kind of came to me, and if you see, she's holding a baby. I don't know if you see that, but the baby's right there. So yes, it is. Thank you for comparing. I'll take that compliment. Yeah.
So I like what everybody is saying, specifically about the interruption of line in pieces like the one just right that you're looking at now, yeah. But then also, again, I keep going around because they're all next to each other and it's hard not to. But your dollhouse series also incorporates line and a grid pattern. So
Yes.
could you talk about the use of grid and line in not just dollhouse series, but maybe even your floral works?
Yes, I love that. I love that question. When I was little, I would draw. You know how you like a dollhouse, you open it up and you see the rooms cut away. Well, I would draw that, like the bedroom, the stairs, the kitchen. I would draw the rooms. So I was fascinated by the dollhouse and the rooms and how they were divided. And I also thought, well, that's a great way to incorporate, you know, the dollhouse series, putting the lines, dividing the spaces up. I do that here. I do it with Fix Your Face. I do it with Don't Count Your Chickens, Pick Your Hairdo, Best of Luck. I don't do it with the House Always Wins. That's an interesting painting too. I want everybody to take a look at that later. So, yes, but dividing the canvas is a great way to kind of plan your composition. And especially with doing the dollhouses, dividing my canvas is a way for me to say, okay, this is the upstairs, and this is the downstairs, and these are the rooms of the house, and what goes in each room. So it was a way for me to organize. And it was also worked perfectly thematically with the idea of the house and rooms.
So I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So of course I know you, but this is not a plant question. What do I know her? So one of the things that fascinates me for all artists, which many of you are probably here now, is we're looking at this and thinking she planned this. This is what she did. She sat down one day and in 3 hours she was done. But we know that that's not how it plays out. And one of the ones that really fascinated me was the one over here with the nest. Thank you. Well, you and I are gonna work together, I know. And so there's chaos, but there's birth, and then there's that house, and there's so much going on. And I would love for you to speak to it because unlike all of the others that seem so well constructed, this one looks like something went awry, but somehow you saved it. So
It did. It went awry in a big way. I was trying to do a realistic face, but it just wasn't happening. And I know I can do them because I've done them. They're around here. So I was working and I'm like, ugh, and I just took and I was, and then I stepped back bird nests are chaotic because birds find anything, and they take all this chaotic stuff that's left, and they put it together, and they make this nest. So I'm like, this is perfect. I'll do a bird's nest here over this chaos, and then I'll do a house, and it's going to be kind of off to the center. And when I painted it, and then I used these acrylic inks that are supposed to be permanent, and then when I shellacked it down, when I shellacked it on there, I was like, oh no. And I was like, no, I can make that work, so it looks kind of creepy. And I'm okay with creepy. And some of my stuff is creepy. You've noticed. That's okay. Some of it's like, and then some of it's really creepy. So it's, so yeah, so that's what happened there, and I thought, that's enough. Like, I tend to put a lot of stuff, like behind John, there's Cats in the Cradle, there's a lot of stuff going on there. There's a lot of stuff in those drawings there. There's a lot of stuff in the other drawings, but this I thought it's enough. And then I showed this to Eric, and Eric has taught me so much. I'm the one that has been studying art for so many years, but Eric, I would show him my work, and he's like, well, have you thought about this? And I'm like, Eric, what was the term you used? It reminded you of the blue paint.
Oh, haint blue?
Paint blue. And he was like, this is a particular paint that they used on houses and porches in the 50s. I'm like, I've never heard of it. And then Eric told me about Arthur Dove, who was a close friend of Georgia O'Keeffe and who did abstractions in nature. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm learning so much from Eric. And it's been great because I would email him like, look what I did. And he'd email me back. And it was like a dissertation because he's so brilliant. He'd be like, have you thought about this? And did you know what? And I was like, and I would go and research it. So fascinating, all of that stuff.
Well, I appreciate that.
Absolutely, you deserve that.
Well, you mentioned Arthur Dove and Georgia O'Keeffe, and you had mentioned in a discussion prior to the opening tonight, Henry Matisse.
Yes, I was very big into Henri Matisse. I would do his still lifes. In fact, I consider this my second act. My first act was when I was in my 30s. I would do I had a gallery that represented me in Palm Beach, Florida, and I did a lot of Henri Matisse still lifes. And I sold quite a few of them. And as my husband was reminding me today that, what was the story, honey? A couple liked my...
Oh, Joel and Joyce took it over to a house and they had a brand new couch on it. Put the painting on the wall and asked how much to redo the couch.
Because they liked my painting. So I started doing that, Van Gogh and Henri Matisse. And then as I started learning more about women artists, because I didn't learn about women artists when I was going through graduate school. In fact, when I was doing my Ph.D., I had wonderful professors in the College of Education that said, go and learn, go teach yourself. So I spent hours in the library. And of course, in North Dakota, we have a lot of wonderful Native Americans nations. And I learned about them. I went and learned. And I studied and I looked at their artwork. And I learned about women artists. I co-authored a children's art book with a colleague of mine. It's called Let's Meet Famous Women Artists. And we had to research it, and I was like, how come I've never heard of these women? We didn't learn about them in graduate school. We had this huge art history book, and it was full of dead white men, but there were no women in there. So I loved, and there were women artists. It's fascinating. Women artists were back, doing the Bayeux Tapestry and years, and women were smart. When I was studying, I learned that a lot of women early on, if they had land, if they were given land and money by their fathers, many of the women, if they married, they'd have to give up that land to their husband. So women were smart. They were like, I'll join the convent. I'll become a nun. Guess what? When you became a nun, you kept your land, you kept your money, and you could get educated. So a lot of women went into the convent to keep their land and to hold on to their money and their titles, and they would get an education. It's fascinating. So I did a lot of study of women artists all through the ages, and a lot of the women artists, I look at postmodern art. Postmodern is They use collage, they use text, they kind of tongue-in-cheek poke fun. I love John Kern Smith, who was a Native American artist. She uses a lot of text in her work, and she brings her culture into it. And so you'll see a lot of text in my work because of that postmodern influence. John Kern Smith, Frida Kahlo, I mentioned Georgia O'Keeffe. There's so many wonderful women artists out there that we need to discover. So.
And you do use a lot of collage, but I want to mention that it isn't just in the Dollhouse series. There are other pieces in this series, or outside of the Dollhouse series rather, that use appropriated pieces of found materials, but it's not just found from a magazine. Some of them are cutouts from old paintings.
Yes, I was telling Eric that much to my husband's dismay, I destroy a lot of my work. I think artists do that. Like I'll have paintings and I'll be like, oh, this is horrible. And I'll cut it up and then I'll go, ooh, that's really cool, I like that piece. Or I'll hold on to pieces of the painting. Like in the Cat's Cradle, the cat and the hand were actually from a painting that I did years before that nothing worked but the hand and the cat. So I cut the painting apart and I was like, I'm gonna hold on to this to the right time. And it was the right time, it worked. So yes, so I do, like a lot of, like the dress in there and the iron are things that I've done before that I will recreate and reuse over and over again. There's a painting on the opposite wall called Coffee Clatch, and I was talking to some people about that, and I was like, do you know what Coffee Clatch means? And they're like, of course I do. And I was like, it's so funny because when I did that piece, I would get so many people say to me, why is it called Coffee Clatch? Like, shouldn't it be called tea time? And I'm like, no. The title comes from the German word Kaffee, K-A-F-F-E-E, Clash, K-L-A-T-C-A, yeah, Coffee Clash, which literally means coffee and gossip. So that's what it means. Coffee Clatch means coffee and gossip. And I can remember, like, oh, you're having a coffee clatch over there, because people, would get gossiping. And I had done a painting, a still life, the very Matisse like, with a coffee cup in it. And I didn't like the painting, but I loved that coffee cup. So I reproduced that coffee cup over and over and over again to make my Coffee Clatch painting. And you'll notice if you walk around and look at it, it's divided. There's 4 sections across, 4 down, and there's a coffee cup in each. They're all different colors, and there's text in each box that pertain to coffee and gossip. Because when I was little, I'm for the generation children should be seen and not heard. So I would be in bed, but down the hall was the kitchen, and I would listen to my mother and her friends sitting around having their coffee. Well, Shirley's, and I would listen, and so all of the words on Coffee Clatch, if you take a look at it later, are from things that I overheard as a child. So that's kind of where that came in. So reusing those images again and again.
Which is, it's very interesting hearing that when you're a child, you sort of began as an abstract artist with the large swaths of a crayon, and then you sort of moved into more figural representational works and more realism. And I guess what I'm getting to is, could you tell us a little bit about your abstract works that we see in the show?
Yes. The 2 last abstract pieces I did are Saint Gabriel There, and the other one is It Was Just a Dream, Go Back to Sleep. And I was telling Eric that in 2019 I was seriously pursuing non-objective work. I was doing a lot of drawing, and when I was doing this drawing, I was almost like in a trance. Like I was just taking my crayon, my marker, my pen, and I was just going. And that kind of intuitiveness, I think, is really important for artists to follow. So Marucci has this book. Would you hold it up? This book I found really helpful. It's called Life, Paint, and Passion, Reclaiming the Magic of Spontaneous Expression by Michelle Hasso and Stuart Kubley. I was given this book in graduate school. I had a wonderful, because I started out in the visual arts department in graduate school, and I switched to the College of Ed, and I had a wonderful was an education professor, but she was a poet. And she came into school one day and she's like, read this book. And I was like, yeah, okay. Like, I skipped to the pictures. I'm like, wow, these are really wacko. And so I had this book, and I forgot about this book. And like I said, I was doing these really crazy images, and then I went back to realism, and then I went back to my dollhouses, and then I started doing this. And I was reading this book again, and some of the quotes in there were fascinating, like, when an image comes knocking on your door, make sure the door is unlocked. And I was reading that, and I was like, wow. And there was also some quotes about, like, you don't always have to know what your work is about. It's okay for it to be mysterious. So I was reading it, and then I opened up to the pictures, which I made myself not look at until I got to that part. And I opened it up, and I saw these pictures, and I was like, wait a minute! I was doing this before, and I stopped myself! And so that's where Travelers came in. I went back to the hands, the images. So like this was like really profound and powerful. It made me go back here. And I was doing it, and I was like, this is so weird. Like, and then I was showing people, and they were like, it's fabulous, I love it. And I was like, okay. So I have to trust myself. I have to follow that instinct. So the one over there, St. Gabriel, and then wake up, go back to sleep, it's just a dream. I was telling Eric, these were non-objective paintings that I did in 2019, and they were actually hanging in my house. And I thought, what the heck, I'll take them off the wall. What's the worst thing that can happen? So I took them off, and I started painting. And I was over the oil paints. As I was telling, the day that Eric drove to my house to pick these up, I literally had these in front of the fan. They're dry now, but these were oil, okay? And I used stand oil, which is very thick, takes a long time to dry, it's non-yellowing, and I used walnut oil, which the Renaissance artists used because it didn't yellow or crack. So I did, like, this is very luscious. Some of these needed to be painted in oil. The birds of paradise on that wall, they needed to be painted in oil. The windows of the soul, that is the portrait behind Eric, that needed to be painted in oil. So oil lends itself to certain things. So I was over it at that point. Because I had like 6 paintings in the garage with fans going on them like 24/7. So finally they were dry. And I said, you know what, I can't do oil anymore. I can't. And I was using very good walnut oil to clean my brushes. Nothing was being poured out. Nothing was being poured down the drain. I was being very green and very earth conscious. And so I was following all of those good standards. But having it take so long to dry, I just couldn't do it anymore. So I literally I have some house paint I use, Bear primer, I love it. And I just started painting, and I had a big water bottle full of water, a spray bottle, and I was spraying and painting and spraying and painting, and it was like a wonderful dance. And when I'm doing my non-objective abstract works, I'm kind of in a trance, I can't even hear John crunching potato chips, because I'm just like, I'm like in that zone. And it's just like, it's just.
I'm right here.
I know. But so it's that kind of feeling where I'm having a dialogue with the line, I'm having a dialogue with the color, I'm having a dialogue with the shapes. And it's this kind of wonderful dance we're doing together, this dialogue. And they'll tell me, okay, we're done, hands off, back away from the painting. Because I'd be like, let me just put one more. And I literally have to stop myself. Jackie, put the brush down, walk away, it's done. So those are some of the processes. Yes, sir.
That was 2019?
No, the one that's underneath it is 2019. That's 2023. I painted over, and I neglected to say, thank you, I neglected to say the paintings that are underneath those was when I was doing my non-objective, I was doing a lot of circles. I was big on circles. So a lot of circles, a lot of dark colors. And I really felt like I outgrew that. And I'm like, these are big canvases, they're 3x4, let me see what happens, what's the worst that can happen, and I absolutely loved them. And I'm so glad that they ended up in the show.
The reason I asked about 19, because that's COVID year.
Yes, and Eric we were talking about that. I was doing a lot of these non-objective, and then COVID happened, and I was sitting at home and I was painting still lifes again, pretty flowers and teacups, and I got very representational again. And then I was like, okay, COVID was over. I'm like, let's get back to non-objective. And this here, Penelope, there was something underneath here, and I went over her. And some of the names are women's names, like I'll say, what do you want to be called? And she'll say Penelope. And so, because I talk to my canvases, they talk to me. So, yeah, so kind of that push-pull, representational, non-representational, back and forth, yes.
Do you dream in color?
I think I do, yeah. Do you?
Yes.
Good. I know, look at her, she's beautiful. Look at this purse.
Yes.
It's fabulous, the whole, everything, the earrings, she's fabulous.
$4.
Yes, sir. Yeah, $4, goodwill. We're shopping with you.
It's more of a comment than a question.
Okay.
If most of the time if you come in and look at artists, they have a signature pretty much, except for the dollhouse. But it seems that you have a potpourri of a lot of styles, and that's really unusual for most artists because they usually stay on some type of trademark. You see one picture, you see what I do that. But with you, I mean, it's variety. That's very unusual. I mean, that means your mind is way.
Yeah.
Okay. I was gonna say, because your husband said that.
Yeah, that's, what is your first name?
TC.
TC, great point, because most artists do have a signature. Like when you see, oh, that's a Picasso, oh, that's a Matisse, oh, that's a Georgia O'Keeffe. And like I was saying, Richie was like, it doesn't even look like the same person did all this work. And the way I kind of look at it is, when you think about an actor or actress, they play many different roles, right?
Yeah.
They don't play the same character. Some people play the same character, but most artists vary. So I thought, why can't I do different things? Why do I have to, and I say to myself, okay, now you're just gonna do still lifes, okay. And then I would see, I'll be like, oh, I love that abstraction, and then I'd be like, oh, but let's be realistic. And so, it's kind of jumping back and forth. I think I'm gonna stay in the non-objective for a while until a dollhouse calls me. Like I was telling Eric, I would do a dollhouse piece, and I'd be like, I'd be exhausted because there's a lot of emotion in there. If you go around and look at each of them, there's a lot of intense emotion. So I'm like, I gotta take a break. I can't do it anymore. And then I'll do my abstract, and that's like a great vacation. It's like I'm traveling, and my mind is giving me a break. And then I'll be called to do another dollhouse. I thought I was done with dollhouses. And then home economics, which is on that side of the wall, there are I was inspired and I drew some hairdos. I was like, hairdo. And I drew those and I drew some eggs and I stamped. And I'm like, I have a great idea. I thought I was done. I thought that one, 13, I'm like, I'm done with dollhouses now. I am done. I'm not doing anymore. And then I drew those hairdos. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm going to do hairdos. So that was pick your hairdo. Then when I got done with that, I was like, well, I kind of like this face cream jar. Let's do. And so I found this antique face powder thing, and so I did fix your face. And then I was like, okay, that's it now. You're done with the dollhouses. You gave it a good try. And then I went on and did a couple more and did a couple more. And then my last one is over there on that wall, Flowers for Mama. Okay. Which my mother was always like, just paint some pretty, don't do any of that weird stuff. Can't you just paint some pretty pictures, some pretty flowers for Mama? So that's why that one was perfect for the end. Sorry, you have a question.
Based on what you've shown us here, I wonder about other mediums like watercolor or stills, and what you might have experienced by not showing any of those here.
I have actually. There's 2 watercolors behind you. The one is of Dreams and Nightmares with the skeletons, and then the abstract one there. And then there's 2 watercolors on that wall, pen and ink and watercolor. So yes.
How about pastels?
Oil pastels are, my oil pastels are on, oil sticks are on Dorit. The oil sticks are here. The oil sticks are on home economics. The oil sticks are over there on The House Always Wins. The oil sticks are on Flowers for Mama. So yeah, like when you, like in my studio, like I'm like, oh, this is the oil color drawer. Oh, this is the acrylic drawer. Oh, this is the oil stick drawer in oil pastel, and this is the watercolor. So yeah, I found this really cool watercolor artist. She makes her own watercolors. She's amazing. She's out in the West, and she uses organic honey and clove oil, and she grinds her pigments, and she makes watercolor palettes. Red bud pigment. She's amazing, and I started buying her watercolors because I saw them. I'm like, I have to have these. So when you get them and you open them up, they smell like clove. So they're amazing. So I have like 8 or 9 of her watercolor sets, and that inspired me to use watercolor.
So we need to smell these paintings?
If you take them out of the glass, they will smell like clove. Yes. Any other questions?
Well, I think with that, we are just in time for a nice thank you to Jackie Kern, and thank you to everybody for attending.
Thank you for your attention and time. Thank you for your patience for listening to me. So thank you very much. Any other questions?
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.